Yo, 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 everybody. This is Mr. Composition, the MC that writes fiction, and we're back at it with another podcast of Chronicles of Self-Awareness. And today, I got a special guest, homie and MC artist, and I call him a medicine man. We got Lucid David. How you doing, man?
How's it going? Nice to be here.
Heck yeah. So just to get started, let the people know, just like a short, I like how Gary Vee says it, the issue number 1 of the comic book series. Like, what's your origin story?
Origin. Well, hip-hop wise, I mean, this is pretty much my first year being on rapping as far as like getting things business-wise done. I mean, for years, like since high school, I was rapping and stuff like that, but just freestyle with the homies, backyard stuff, party stuff, and doing freestyle battles. I don't even battle no more. That's crazy. I used to freestyle. I don't even freestyle like that. I write more. But yeah, as far as it goes, what I've just been doing lately is the multimedia group business and just kind of going to start doing music videos. We got modeling services, helping get aspiring models out there without them working with major agencies taking a cut. That's another thing, like what a lot of people don't know when it comes into the models. Just like labels, I mean, they do the same thing. They take a big old portion of the cut, and then they really make nothing, next to nothing, and so they have to always get more jobs. So that's another thing we hope to change as far as in San Antonio wise, you know what I mean? Pretty much for the most part, as far as a rapper goes, just been trying to get some music out there. I actually launched my first single back in January, like January 19th. That was the Soul Ties. And then the Soul Ties, it did pretty good on WorldStar. Got like 400,000 views. Right now it's like at 50, like about 50K on Spotify. And with the views and stuff like that. So it pretty taken off pretty good for like my first single and stuff like that. We just launched another one that's a Slevin Culebra. And so that's the one probably just like about, I would say 3 days ago got launched. The 14th. So pretty excited for that.
Heck yeah. And you mentioned something, battle rapping. So, man, did you happen to see the Cassidy versus Hitman Holla battle?
I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't.
Man.
I got to. I heard
man.
people talking about it.
Bro, that was, so I definitely watched battle rap. I think that if you are in any sort of hip hop, battle rap is like one of those pillars. And I like Cassidy as far as on the battle rap, but I got introduced to him from his mixtapes. I remember like Cassidy, man, there was this dope Made You Look freestyle that he demolished. It's not even fair. But seeing his battle raps and seeing the Hitman Holla and everything, just the way I love strategies. I love things like chess, different things like that, and the way that Cassidy maneuvers as far as even prior to the battle. They had like this little kind of like weigh-in type of thing where it was like him and Hitman Holla, and it got super heated, but it wasn't like on Cassidy's end. It was all Hitman Holla, like in his emotion. Like Cassidy understood, even if what you're saying isn't true in battle rap, if the person can get you in an emotional state, then they won. So who's some of the battle rappers, whether locally or in general, when you was doing battle rapping, or even to this day that's on your radar? Any favorites?
Somebody who I looked up to when it came to battling, I used to watch King of the Dot, and I would always watch King of the Dot, Disaster. Okay. I think Disaster tears a lot of people apart, and it's just like, damn, you know what I mean? Haven't seen a lot of people like go against him and then, always win. Sometimes you got those people, that beat him and stuff like that, but I mean, just the way he strategized. And one thing I love about battle rapping is kind of like how you say, it's kind of like chess in that sense, because, when you're playing on the clock, and then like, so with that, you're playing on the clock, you got to think fast. At the same time, you got to be strategic. At that same time, it's got to make sense. Mm-hmm. The move got to make sense.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people just say something, you're like, what did he just say? You know what I mean? It's like that wasn't even good. Or, and like
exactly.
People just look at you dumb. So for the most part, that's one of the things I used to love. And like a lot of people don't know, battle rapping goes like back into the biblical days, when King David would go to war, or like any of the soldiers back in the day would go to war. They actually had a thing called a diatribe, and what they would do is right before they got into battle, they would try to psych out the enemy by sending their best poet against another of their best poet, and then they would speak like ferocious poems.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, well, that's battle rapping.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, that is battle rapping to the T. The fact that they would use that as a form in war, I think says a lot as far as the power of words and the fact that they would use that. And you mentioned as far as King David, so that gets me into a segue as far as your hip hop name, and then as far as your alias as well. So we have Lucid David with 2 eyes, and then we have David Gabriel. And so what is the meaning behind both of those names and the origin?
So like starting from the very beginning, I actually got into hip hop around like high school time. I was getting in a lot of trouble and stuff like that. And then I got in trouble with the law. So after I got in trouble with the law, that's when they basically rerouted me to go to like community service and stuff like that. And so like through one of my old high school teachers, she had pointed me to like a church. She was like, oh, you want to get community service hours, go help out at this church, you'll get these community service hours. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna just go here, get these hours split.
Yeah.
But little I know, it changed my whole life, you know what I mean? And so when I went to that church, they go by New Method, now they go by the Well Experience. My pastor, he was like basically an at-risk youth who changed his life around and for hip hop, and he made a hip hop church. And it's a non-denomination church, and they welcome everybody. And basically like he kind of played, that role in my life as a male role model to teach me like, hey, there's many ways. Because back in the day when I used to rap like battle and stuff, it was like on your Zero Texas SPM vibe, and then like, but everything started coming around when he was teaching me how to rap. He was like, a lot of people use filler words and a lot of people use all this stuff, when in actuality you can use divergent words to get your point across and stop using filler words so repetitively. And so when he taught me that, he would do like often little different things where like, say if we're in an environment, like we're just going around the park, he'll start rapping about things around the park, this and that, and just generally kind of like, oh, stoplight, da-da-da, going off of the word stoplight, just different, and I'm like, damn, he taught me a whole different position of the craft. That's why in most of my songs, I try not to cuss, I try to keep it at a minimal, because I've always wanted to be able to where it's like, man, people at your church could play this, you know what I mean? And like, so with that, also it's like, people wouldn't mind their kids listening to it, because they'll be like, oh, what's this? It's like, oh, he's not saying nothing bad, you know what I mean? Me going into that, he basically took me in, taught me how to rap, and I was doing gospel music. That's where I first started. My first rap name actually used to be Redeem.
So that's dope. Like being a thing. So starting off as far as in the basically a hip hop in the church. And so okay. So how does that tie into the names?
So basically, when I did start off as Redeem, I was thinking myself as being redeemed, and stuff like that, and I wanted to be a redeemer, and so how the name shifted, because I basically started coming into more self-awareness of myself. I went through those days coming through an awakening. I was a deacon for several years, and through those years, I mean, it was just a self-aware experience to where I started gaining more knowledge of myself and where I would be if I basically kind of quit all the bull that I was doing. Because even though I was in the church, I was still up to no good. You know what I mean? And like, I mean, it's just being young and dumb. That's what I always chalk it up to. But it has its purpose and it has its reasons.
Yeah.
And so like, later on, going by David Gabriel. So David Gabriel is just a combination of my father's name and my great-grandfather's name, both the patriarchs. And so my father and my great-grandfather's from my mother's side. And so like his name was David, that's who I'm named after, my middle name. And so like I always went by that because David means the beloved, and my father, his name was Gabriel, and so like his name meaning like the messenger. And so that being said, I always thought of myself as the message, if he's the messenger. Yeah. So like with that, I always put David Gabriel, the beloved messenger. Basically, probably how I felt to myself at that time is like my purpose.
Yeah.
Lucid David just pretty much came from me thinking about, you know, oftentimes everybody would hear my raps, or they would hear about the conversations I would have with people, just overhearing things or things like that, and they would say, damn, that's like so complex or this and that. But when I thought to myself, I was like, nah, but it's really simple, you know? Yeah. And so when you break it down, like sometimes, you know, the way I think of Lucid David, it just means simple David, you know, because even though it might sound complex, it's really also simple. Yeah. Some Lauryn Hill, you know, it could all be so simple.
It could all be so simple, you know, and so that's what's really dope, because, you know, when I look at hip hop on its very core, like the packaging can be complex, but the energy within the packaging is very simple. It is very lucid, and not simple as in the meaning, but it's literally pure energy. There's nothing complex about that, you know. And seeing the evolution of hip hop, and even just, you know, as far as the way that you do music. So that's one of the things I can relate with, is that a good 98% of my music does not include cuss words. And I think that it was because growing up, I knew the difference between being around adults and being around like the homies, you know, like I can be myself, but I also know almost pretty much to this day, like parents, I've never cussed around my parents, you know, and you know, I understood I didn't want to have to continue editing, you know, certain things out, and just the way I wrote, it was my feeling, but it was always, it never had to worry about cussing. Like cussing wasn't the way that I delivered the message. Of course, in different ways, like, you know, Lauryn Hill, you know, Adam motherfucker, so you niggas hear me, you know, and different things like that. But it never was a core aspect of me, and it almost went unnoticed. I think until I actually say stuff, people wouldn't even notice that, oh, he did not cuss actually for this whole album. You know, but the message, you know, and it's funny because it's just all like, there will be almost, if you're doing gospel music or gospel hip hop, it's like people like to put you in a particular box. And honestly, when I would hear people like Lecrae, even though he is a Christian rapper, you know, it didn't sound gospel-y. You know, it literally sound, and I think that as an artist, what makes a great artist is being able to not be bound to a specific, you know, it's like almost like they can't place you. You know, it's like it's universal. You know, even though they want to put you under a particular category or label, it is literally that the complete opposite, you know. And so with that, with as far as your experience, and you know, this podcast is Chronicles of Self-Awareness, so within your own self-awareness, do you feel like the introduction or the way hip-hop was presented, or the new way hip-hop was presented to you from the pastor, or do you feel like it was the church that kind of, or do you feel like it was your natural, like that age and you were just very aware, or do you think it was kind of like a combination of all of them?
So it's a little funny because the way it kind of came about to me is like, so majority of my life music was chasing me and I kept pushing it away. Like, and so like even when the church, I did it for a while, I loved it, but something felt off. I didn't feel like I was putting my soul into it. It felt soulless, you know. And even though I had the poetry in there and this and that, I felt like I wasn't completely in it. So I did end up leaving the gospel stuff, and I went about doing it the way I do it now. But pretty much, I mean, if you really think about it, my stuff's still gospel, you know? And like the way I always think about it, gospel just means the good news, the greater good news. And it's like, what's the difference? You know what I mean? It's still good news, you know? And so like with that, to be honest, what kind of actually changed my self-awareness on things was a lot of pain.
Mm.
It was, I would say it was the church. The church helped me, I guess you would say, think about morality more and think about my decisions more. But it was the pain that really made me advance and actually go towards the music, because I've had several moments, and there was one moment a long time ago. I think this was back in like 2014, like around that time, maybe a little after, but there was a moment where like these guys try to rob me or whatever, and I was outside, I was just walking. It's night. It's like 2 a.m. No business to be out 2 a.m, right? And but basically they try to rob me. I had stuff, but I mean I didn't give them nothing. It was all in my backpack, but pretty much, I lied my way out of that situation. I mean, I told them I was homeless, whatever like that, and then they stopped bothering me. But pretty much from that moment, when they had a gun in my face, I was thinking to myself, like, damn, what the fuck have I ever done? Like, period. I had never made no music, never did this or that, and I was like, what am I doing? It made me really kind of think, But even after that little fleeting glimpse of that moment, I continued to not do music, And then so, like, it was crazy. It actually took, I wouldn't say a breakup, but it took, like, an experience with a woman, and for that, like, and I actually have an album coming out about that, pretty sooner than later type stuff. But pretty much like what it was it brought me to an awakening moment within myself where it made me rethink life, period, just because of everything that was happening within that situation. And so from within there, that's when I started pursuing it more. And then also, our in-house producer, Ill, and his brother, TXS. So like from them, they were even trying to get me to do music, and then I kept brushing them off like, nah, I'm good, I mean, they knew I could rap, this and that, here and there. Sai and Rico, they would try to get me to go to certain spots like Ventura and things like that, and I still be like, nah, But I mean, pretty much doesn't mean I wasn't doing things. I was still writing time to time. I was still, like I'd hear things freestyle by myself, I guess you would say keeping the blade sharp, But it wasn't until like, I would just say when I started really pondering on the fact, and I'm like, damn, it takes so much for the universe to be like pounding something in your face for you to be like, well, I guess I should be doing this.
Yeah.
It's like I have all the resources, I have the connections, I know the people, I know passionate people, and at the same time, at the end of the day, it's like, well, why aren't you pursuing it, And it got into a deeper level within myself to where it was like, I always thought because of the things I rapped about, and when you hear a lot of mainstream rappers and this thing that pops off, and, I ain't no Little Pump, I ain't no Blueface, you know what I mean? And like, you just kind of second guess yourself, and you're like, well, maybe people won't even mess with this type of stuff, and it made me kind of diminish myself to where I was like, it's not even worth trying, But then I guess it's just all who you place yourself around,
Right.
And so like when you place yourself around that environment of people who do vibe on that level and who do connect on that level, they understand it. And when they're in their understanding of it, I mean, y'all can all conjoin, and then great things come of it,
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. And, it's interesting because you bringing up pain and then second guess it. Y'all make sure to listen to my new single, Second Guess It. But that's literally what it was made about. I had a similar experience, except it was with an 18-wheeler in LA. And it was like being in that situation where we're in LA, we're there for music, we're on the tour, we're literally on the way to get like some herb and then head to the open mic or whatever, and on the way there, I'm in the passenger side, 18-wheeler hits us, got it all on camera, and I just remember I was all like, dang, like it literally could have all been done, like over, and I'm just like, man, I still didn't do this, and this. I'm sitting on these albums, and like you said, it was like, even though that experience happened in 2018. Even though that experience happened, and even though like I'm still doing things, it's almost like, how you navigate through life, and you're just all like, man, I could be doing a lot more, embracing what it is that you're called for. Then there's still that element of, man, that was a crazy situation. I need to get my, stuff. But then there's still like the dragging of the feet, and I feel like that is necessary because, like you're saying, as far as the self awareness, it was funny because around 2014 was around the time that I kind of like got into that self awareness, and I weighed the most that I weighed in my life. Like I weighed a little over 250 and I had lost 100 pounds, but prior to that, it was like 2014. That was as far as attention wise and everything with my music. Even though I was super unhealthy, I had a lot of attention as far as with my music. I was on like the smoking section, DJ booth, all these different things, but I was completely not happy. And so I found myself going into watching certain videos and everything like that. And I remember probably like September-ish of 2014, I was in a bathtub, and this was the first time that I had ever astral projected, and it reminded me, and I remember it very, very vividly because there's a movie, I don't remember if it's either one of the Sinister movies or Conjuring, but whichever one of those movies where the little boy, he's like in basically like the astral realm, and he has to come back to his body before the beings there.
Sinister.
Yeah, Sinister. Yeah. So that situation of him having to get back to his body before he was like lost forever and someone else took over it, I vividly remember that because I was like, yo, if I don't get back right now, then I'm gonna be stuck here. And I remember coming back to my body and then being like, what in the world happened? Because I was just saw like, it was more than just being on the ceiling and looking down at myself. That was just like the first part. Like after that, it just kept going further and further. And it didn't go into space. It just went to a space that I hadn't seen before. And coming back, I'm just all like, whoa. And then that started, and it was funny because around that time I had gotten with my ex leading into that. So it was like 2015 we had actually got together, but leading up to that, it was like I was already looking up different things on being healthier, like a girl and everything like that. She introduced you, like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and try this stuff too. So it was like because of the combination of her already being a vegetarian, I completely, after watching, I think it was like Fork Over Knives and just like a couple of other, it was like, it's like the self-awareness like starter kit. You go through like Spirit Molecule and like all these different like documentaries and stuff like that. And basically I had went through that, and then, I stopped eating meat, I did a 10-day master cleanse. I kept on shocking my body because at that point I had going a day, let alone literally 3 years without eating meat, and I had stopped eating meat right before Thanksgiving. So I went to Thanksgiving and I had to have the ultimate discipline of just feeling all the good stuff, and they hooked it up that Thanksgiving, and I was just all like, nah. And so like I went into 2015, I had did the 10-day master cleanse. So not only did I stop eating meat, that was a shock to my system, but then I went 10 days with only drinking a gallon of water a day that was mixed with the cayenne pepper and the grade A maple syrup and freshly squeezed lemons. Went through that for 10 days, and my body, when I say that I didn't even know your body can heal that quick, people saw me and they thought I was glowing. But physically I felt lighter than I ever had, and it was going through that process of, and little did I know that was a very small and beginning portion of this whole lifelong journey, and so I definitely understand, the pain aspect, being able to be at a place where some people, they kind of, sometimes artists get into, they can be labeled under like depressive, or only being able to make good music under pain or different things like that. And the thing is that I just feel like we are very good at converting, and that's brings me to my next question. So within that conversion, I'm a firm believer that words have power, which is why there's just certain stuff that I won't say or even repeat on tracks, because for me, when I hear certain artists, and they say and they speak things, whether that be like, sometimes they'll be almost like, I wouldn't say predicting their own death, but it's just all like, I feel like because you're in a crowd and those crowds are repeating it and then you're repeating it, it turns into a mantra. And so what are your thoughts on words and being open with, as far as like not hindering yourself, but also realizing like, oh, maybe I need to be a little bit aware on what I put out there, because if somebody's repeating it, or even I repeat it, even though that this was a part of me, maybe I need to rearrange this a certain way.
I feel you on that. See, like, so for me, that was basically the journey that I was going through when I first started doing music and stuff. Because I felt like the rap that I would do, I did a lot of horrorcore rap, like some Brother Lynch, some Tech Nine, and all that stuff. I mean, I felt like I was sowing deceit and sowing like death, basically, by speaking all those things, because how I wanted to be then was more like Slim Shady. I'm gonna say anything to shock and awe you, to capture your ear, and you be like, damn, I don't think I've ever heard a rapper say something like that. Now I'm doing the same thing, but just from a different perspective aspect, to where it's like, I'm gonna say things that you probably never heard J. Cole or Kendrick say, just to kind of get that brain jogging, to be like, damn, what is that? I'm gonna look that up, and it's just kind of like a little bit of that shock factor. Everybody has their ways of doing it. Tekashi has his outlandish ways of doing it, but I feel like you can do it in more tame aspects, and still get the same message across of getting attention. But like, as far as for me, I really feel like words are very binding. The frequencies you put out there, they do come back. And most times, when it comes into like, I do study a lot of stuff like the monks and the Benedictines and the type of methods that they do. And when it comes into certain methods, how there's some monks that don't speak for months. That's their fasting. They won't speak. There's a whole temple of monks that won't speak. And one of them is Hariya Das. He was my teacher's teacher, and that's Ram Dass. And so his teacher, Hariya Das, he was like over 12 years no speaking. And so like with that, you become like a whole different aspect of self when you don't speak, but you still have to convey a message to somebody. He would talk through chalkboard, and even though he never had any schooling in his life, he knew over 8 different languages. And so it's kind of crazy, like the things that you can still embrace, but all he was doing was absorbing everything that he was, I guess you would say, the universe, the world, and it just comes out of you because you are it. There can be, there's a thing Bill Weiss talks about, it's called knowledge reprogression or memory reprogression, and he basically talks about your soul has like a big database of binary memories, and through that you can channel to where you go so deep in the soul. It's basically like what people do in meditation, just put in better words, but basically you'll go deep into there and you can bring up all that stuff. So like if you know 5 languages from other lives, you can bring it up like you knew them your whole life in this life, guitar, art, all that stuff. That's why sometimes some people, they just go to a page and they're like, I don't know art, and then they Mona Lisa, just
exactly.
like, damn, and so stuff like that just kind of pops up out of there. I always like to call it the Akash,
the Akashic records,
and so like basically they pull it from the Akash. That's one thing that I've been working on, for years with myself. There was several things that were popping up, and to be honest, a lot of the stuff that I started seeing when it came into words and seeing a lot of different things was like when I was a deacon. See, I was still like on drugs and stuff. I used to smoke like the K2 and the Climax and all that stuff, and when I smoked that stuff, it didn't do to me what it did to other people. I would see people look like heroin addicts, all slumped and sleeping, but I'm a very high functioning person, so like when I would smoke it, I'd be at work, I'd be in the church, I've given sermons while I was on it, and people wouldn't know that I was on it. But what I was seeing when I was on it, it was like an acid trip. I would see demons, angels, and like I've once seen, my pastor one time was giving a sermon. I'm sitting in the pews and I see like an angel, like a 12-foot tall angel in a sense, like kind of crept up on the floor, putting its palm through the back of through his back like a puppet.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
imagine you just seeing that while
Yeah.
tripping, and you're like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, and it just lets you know like words do come from other places. I felt like that I had to see that because it was like, oh well, the words are coming from here. You know, and sometimes he would speak things that he didn't know about. I would never tell him what I was going through or whatever, but he just knew. It was crazy, like to the T, to the exact T, you know. But that's that whole intuition, the discernment that we get from the other frequencies that are telling us because we resonate there.
Yeah.
You know, and like if you resonate on a very low frequency, like you want to be your lowest potential of life, you're gonna experience all those experiences that it has to offer.
Exactly.
You know, I've been there. I've been to the lows. I haven't been to my lowest low, but I kept myself from going to that lowest low, you know. Me coming to the higher levels of the frequencies that I now kind of try to just stay on track in or even go higher than that. Usually it's shown me how grace has kept me in its stead, you know, because karma and grace are generally the same thing. I mean, karma is grace working in your favor. We just often think of it as bad.
Yeah.
You know, it's all just how you perceive it, you know what I mean? Because, like, sometimes the littlest act, you know, though it seems bad your car didn't start that day, I mean, you never know it saved your life, you know?
I think about that
so,
all the time.
So stuff like that, when I think about that, like all those moments that happened to me, you know, I've nearly overdosed. I've nearly, you know, a lot of different things that happened to me. I've nearly, like, died probably, like, 20 times in my life, and I'm like 28. So like when you think about that, it's like, damn, that's like, you know, I've nearly drowned so many times, car crashes, this. It lets you know, like, well, I'm here for a reason. You know, there's a purpose, you know, and in that purpose, it was just like all pointing towards doing music, you know. But I felt like things had to break me down to basically humble me, you know, like what Kendrick says is like, sit down, you know, be humble, because it's like at the time I wasn't humble in myself. I was very narcissistically ego driven in that sense, how I feel like when I look back at it. And you know, it crushed me down to be humble towards like put that real, it's like you want that soul in your lyrics and you're gonna have to be broken. I have to break you to make you what you are asking, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, and ain't no wisdom come without pain, you know. And so at that same time, you know, I always get grateful for it, you know. Even though experiences seem how they do for face value, I knew it built the character in myself that it advanced me to where I needed to be in this moment.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree, because it's just all like, man, when I sit there and I'm just like, man, I'm obviously here for a reason, because there's just certain circumstances where I'm just like, I've seen other people in those circumstances. The rate of people surviving getting hit by 18-wheeler is very, very low. We walked away. I had glass in my hair when I went to the open mic and everything like that, but it lets you know where you're at. And so you touched on something super dope, which was the correlation and the similarity as far as between acids. So when diving into the world of psychedelics, what do you think was your most, and it might be all of them, but the maybe one experience through psychedelics that literally was like almost like a course correction, something that was just like, whoa, it all makes sense?
For me, generally, it's crazy because I always tell people, and I don't ever recommend it. I was like saying like the climax is like, it really took me to the climax. That's how I felt about it. And like, I know everybody had their different experiences when they've been on it, but through my experiences, when one time, and I even wrote a song about it, but I felt like I overdosed, and that was kind of like the time where I was like, okay, I need to stop smoking this shit. Yeah. And I felt like I overdosed because it was like how you said with the astral projection, I saw myself kind of like lifeless, and I saw myself like on the couch basically just like dead, and I was like, damn, I did it. But while that was all happening, it was like another layered film kind of above in my eyes consciousness, kind of like how you would see thoughts. And like that's the best way I can explain it, kind of like how you would see thoughts, and it was like literally my life flashing before my eyes from childhood all the way until death, but at the same time also seeing how things go on without me and seeing everybody else's lives go on without me, and exactly how all that would happen, you know. And I saw, it was crazy because at the end of that whole loop, it was kind of like an acid trigger loop where you're just stuck, you know. And when I was in that moment, I also saw, it was crazy because I always call it, it was the the whole recipe for immortality. You know what I mean? Like it was saying, if you did this and this and this, you could live to be 150. But if you did this and this, you can add 50 more years and da da da. You know, and it was just kind of like stacking up. But it was happening so fast that I couldn't retain none of it. But it's not meant to be retained by me. It was just letting me know, like, you could have done other things or you could do other things. But at the same time, you know, me trying to calculate it all, I was in that moment like brought back into thinking like, damn, you know, what am I doing? And at that age, I was literally 19. So like 19, from being 19, a lot of people go through those struggles just coming out of high school, this and that. And I was only on that stuff for like 8 months, but it was like the longest 8 months of my life. You know, it feels that way. You know what I mean? It felt like I was on that shit for years, you know, especially when I explain it to people. But it was just like, it was just 8 months. But I mean, sometimes time is irrelevant in that sense, you know. And like, so with that, I did learn. It did take me, like, even when the first time I did it, and I was at work and I was with somebody, and that's when like a person who I know, you know, introduced me to it. I was on probation at the time, so that's the only reason I tried it, because I was like, well, I can't smoke bud, I can't, you know, really do a lot of things. So I just was like, all right, I'll smoke it. You know, he's like, oh, it's just like bud, and I'm like, all right, you know what I mean? So I smoked it and stuff, but it was crazy because like within 2 minutes, I saw my mom's whole life of how she lived her life through her eyes as if I was her in those 2 minutes. I thought like time had flown. I'm like, oh fuck, it's been an hour, and really it's only been 2 minutes. When I looked at the clock and I was like, damn, that was intense. Like, how did I even experience that? What was that? I don't get it. You know, but tears were like rushing down my eyes. You know what I mean? And it's just like, what the hell? You know? And so like when you experience things like those, it really makes you reevaluate certain things. But even though at 19 I was so ignorant that even though that happened, it was like, all right, business as usual, be a fuck up. You know, it still took more breaking down, you know, until it got me to that point where it's like, damn, to where I needed to plead out to the universe, to the one, and be like, okay, I need your help. You know, I need to change some things. And so like that's when I started doing that. And when I started doing that, it was like a slingshot just flung me forward. You know, it was like, see, you think you're behind, but you're really on course. This is what needed to be done.
No, those situations, those course corrections are so important, because it's like I will experience some of those particular course corrections, and it's like sometimes it's very hard for men, especially if you come from a very masculine, like alpha male, you know, father, you know, type of thing, or grandparent, you know, something like that. And, you know, almost things like asking for help or crying or all of those different things, you know, were frowned upon. But it was like, the messed up thing is that I know that they do it, and if they don't, you know, then you can kind of see why they're acting the way that they are, because they never had a release. You know, they literally walk around, and whether society or different things have pushed that upon them to make them feel that way, or even the fact that as a man you might feel like, man, I don't even have time to think about my feelings or process my emotions. But then I look at things and I'm all like, oh, that's literally what you need to do. You know, like there's no reason to have, as far as those particular, you know, feelings like bunched in. It literally weighs you down, you know, and you're trying to, you know, do what you need to do and follow your passions and your dreams. And like, you know, shout out to my homeboy Passport Polanco. He has his family and trying to balance as far as wife, kids, and then, you know, your dream. And sometimes there's not even like a platform or even a space for, you know, the men to talk about their legit feelings, to just be like, yo, it's okay to take a break. You know, it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to let it out. because once you do, everything starts to change. You feel lighter. You feel more in control of your thoughts. And so before we get out here, I got another question to ask. So on the music side of things, so what are you looking forward to in 2021 and beyond? What are some gadgets, you know, in the music world or platform, and just like in general with you and your crew? What do you look forward to?
Basically look forward to working with a lot of other local artists. On top of that, we've had some great features from people like Creed 23, from you yourself, you know, trying to get something going with that too. So like stuff like that, you know, generally we all just love music, you know. It's like, sure, everybody wants to make money and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's like we love doing what we love. You know, we just want to like spread it. We want to be heard. That's another thing, because it's like for so many years you could write so much or do so much, and it's like sometimes it falls on deaf ears because you never tell anybody. Something I always told people is like I always bared the sins, like the sinner in the parable of talents. Like in the Bible, you know, they have that parable where it talked about the servant. You know, the master gave the servant, all these servants, you know, several different talents, and he gave one to a certain servant. All of the other ones, they did something with them, whether they multiplied them or used them and lost them or whatever. But there was this one servant who basically like hid his. And, you know, when the master came around, he's like, well, what did you do with your talents? And he was like, well, I hid mine. He goes, well, here you goes. And he goes, well, why did you hide it? Like, you didn't do nothing with it. You know, what's the point of me giving it to you and you're not going to do nothing with it? Mm-hmm. You didn't waste it. You didn't use it. You didn't multiply it. Like, what's the use of even giving it to you? So I should just take it away. You know, and so like me always pondering on that, it was just like, damn, what is the whole purpose of me having multiple talents of the things that I can do, many capabilities, yet not do anything with them? And that's the thing that we all strive for. Like, even with the artists on the label, a lot of us, I mean, we've been rapping for years but never actually putting it out. We never made platforms for it. We never went to shows to do it. And it's pretty much us actually doing it now, putting it out, showing people what it is that is out here, what we're capable of, you know, even though they didn't know we possessed it.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great way. That's a great way to end it. Y'all, if you have the talent, do not hide it, because it's just like there is a reason for it, and that's a lot of what this podcast is about, the Chronicles of Self-Awareness. And so where can people find you on the social webs?
You can find me on Instagram, Lucid David. It'll be LUCIID_David with 2 I's also in it. Or you can find me just on YouTube also under the same name without the underscore. And, you know, we are going to be making a website for Paradisus pretty soon. Paradisus is a media company, so Paradisius Media Group. And on there we have an Instagram for that too.
Super dope. Well, thank you again for being the guest. And y'all make sure to tune in. Make sure to cop their music. They got new tracks out, more to come. You got the one with Omnis Monster, right?
Yes.
The recent one, and that new single is super dope. So y'all make sure to check that out. Again, this is Mr. Composition, the MC that writes fiction, with another episode of Chronicles of Self-Awareness. Peace.
Later.
Coming back to earth with a couple gems of wisdom that might take a few decades to decode. So I better get the work on. No need for second guessing, cause it was already written, or was it? Is it all predetermined or devised by your hand? No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. Is it all predetermined or devised by your hand? No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. No need for second guessing when you're sticking to the plan. Take control of what you can't control. Break out this handheld, hell made digital.